Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Vlog, where we discuss activity that goes on here with the BuzzBeaver channel. That includes things like headlines that are in the news, current events, pop culture, social media, technology, and items of interest that come up during the week that allow us to have a little bit of a dialogue. If this is your first time here to the channel, I'd like to welcome you here and would encourage you guys, if you're here on YouTube, to click on that watermark down there in the bottom right hand corner to subscribe. Or if you are watching this on BitChute or DTube, of course, you can give me a follow there as well, as your guys' participation and support is greatly appreciated. In gaming news this week, at least by the time of this video release, we should have the new Season 4 and the 1.22 update for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Now, I may not have it quite yet as this video is released, but in the top right-hand corner, I can give you guys the community news that talks about what happened last week and what we can anticipate for this week. But nonetheless, probably as time goes by with the release of this video, I will eventually have the link to the patch notes and so forth in the top right-hand corner. Last week, we talked about all the peculiar elements to the current protest and rioting that have been going on and all the differences. And we've had an even more interesting development as the protests have continued into this week as well. And what's interesting about it is you have heard a lot about defunding the police, particularly in Minnesota. Now, a lot of the political parties and even some of the mayors of cities and so forth aren't entirely on board with defunding the police. And it is interesting, if not kind of ironic, that even Joe Biden has come out to say that he does not believe in defunding the police. However, you may not need to defund the police if your police department has already kind of abandoned the precinct, as we see what happened in Seattle, Washington this week. As a matter of fact, I want to read from the article here on my phone. Normally, you guys know that I have a piece of paper, but I did want to read it from this article because it is kind of interesting. They've given us the precinct, Seattle police backs away, and protesters take back Pine, as it is titled here. I will leave a link, of course, for you guys down in the published section. The Seattle Police Department announced Monday afternoon that the barricade near the East Precinct, where officers have used pepper spray, tear gas, and flashbang grenades on demonstrators for 8 days, would be removed. Let's see, during a press briefing, Police Chief Carmen Best said Seattle Police would try something new. We're not going to evacuate or abandon the precinct, she said. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm going to show you images here on the screen of this kind of a rough layout of the downtown area that these particular protesters have taken over. And many have discussed that this is just part of LARPing, right? The live action role play. As we're kind of in this dystopian, very bizarre time right now, or at least as much as what the media is wanting to cover and what they want to portray as part of a narrative to all of this type of protesting and chaos, because there are particular individuals that benefit from this sort of activity, of course, and we already know that we're into an election year, so all these kinds of things do play into these activities. But what I wanted to say here is continue on with what she was saying, is that we'll be hardening the East Precinct facility by boarding up the exterior windows and applying fire retardant to the building exterior and installing fencing, which is just insane to think. But there are other aspects to all of that as well. On Monday evening, a protester addressed the crowd. They've given up the precinct, and we've got to be smart, and we have to work together, and we have to remain peaceful, and we have to remain strong. How do you remain peaceful and or strong if you've actually taken over part of a city that requires law and order to maintain and to ensure that the safety of the people is there? They can't guarantee this. These are just general citizens that have basically hijacked a police precinct. All right, this is the message that we're trying to drive, they said. Okay, and I'm going to have additional images there on the screen for you guys to see. We're not going to do what they want us to do. We're going to take care of it because this is our street. Now, okay, so I'm not exactly sure what else is going on here. Now, you've heard the expression, you give someone an inch and they'll take a mile. And this is kind of a little bit of what we're seeing here is many of these cities, many of these areas, obviously, if you get a permit to protest, you have the legal authority to exercise your First Amendment right. But then you go into this kind of nonsense right here. Now, we've heard Ilhan Omar, for example, talk about defunding the police there in Minneapolis, and we're still trying to hear as to what they'll actually do with that. But there are problems to defunding police departments and making those sorts of changes where you move from a designated police force, an area of authority that you're familiar with, into something a little different. Just doesn't happen overnight like this. And you see a lot of this very instantaneous type of activity because we do live in a very information era where we're accustomed to getting information instantly, right? And so these things take time. Even with the whole situation with George Floyd, this case is going to take time. This may not even go to trial for another year. I mean, it takes time to put these things into place. And these individuals are wanting action now because they're just insistent to have what they want, when they want it, how they want it. And this is just kind of devolving. This whole thing is devolving. I think right now the president has kind of taken a stand back approach and allowing these governors and mayors and city officials to kind of handle these things. But you can't just have a group of people just taking over a facility. And I find this interesting because a lot of the arguments when it comes to gun control, because there's guns involved in some of these situations as well, the gun control activists have always said that under the Second Amendment, it should be regulated under or to be able to obtain firearms, you should be able to have an established militia. But yet at the same time, the FBI and other authorities don't necessarily take very well to individuals taking up arms in some what could be perceived as an insurrection, as what maybe individuals have interpreted here. But what's interesting is I saw a lot of this talk and this particular article and information on Tim Pool's commentary the other day, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and I wanted to share it with you because here you have essentially an insurrection. Are we in that civil war that we talked about here on the channel, where these individuals have moved from this social disorder, the cancel culture, into real life? And even within the real life aspect of it, they really can't even handle it with any form of order. It's just kind of a chaotic scene. But nonetheless, as the police have said there, they will, I guess, take back their city and or their precinct. But nonetheless, this is a rather bizarre situation. I did want to bring it up and outline it for you guys. I will leave links for you down there in the published section below this video. And of course, it's been very meme worthy this week, but hopefully by the time this video comes out, this thing would have been straightened out and coiled. So we'll just keep an eye on it. But nonetheless, guys, you can read about it there below this video. On Tuesday here in Georgia, we had early elections, which was quite nice because I've gone ahead and secured my vote, and I was able to go ahead and cast that for my November selection, as you would imagine. But nonetheless, of course, we also had local elections and individuals to vote on within our communities, as well as for the state, the House, the Senate, and so forth. But nonetheless, we were able to get out and do that vote on Tuesday. There were some issues apparently in downtown Atlanta in those particular precincts. And it's important to remember that the precincts or areas where you vote, your districts, are responsible for taking care and making sure that everything goes smoothly. Now, we do have some newer equipment that was being used, or that is being used in this particular election apparently. But for me, it went very smoothly. I walked in, I was asked if I had an ID, as well as whether or not I had my phone, and if I did have my phone, to deactivate it. Then I went over to a table, which I normally do anyway, to kind of where they take your ID, they scan it. It was on a little digital pad, like a tablet. And then they asked me what my party affiliation was. I selected it, and then I signed my name. I was given the little plastic card that we used to insert into the machines. I inserted the card as I normally do, and then, of course, completed the ballot. And you have a write-in option as well, although it is in touchpad form. At the end of it, you get to see a panel that shows you who you have voted for, and at the end of that, it is then printed out. You take the physical copy, you can look at it to make sure that everything is correct on there as well. And then you go and you turn that into what looks like a big bucket with a scanner on top of it. Then you put your paper in the scanner, you wait a few seconds, it goes through, and your ballot has been cast. So it was a rather quick voting process for me. It was from the time I walked in to the time I left out. It was probably or the time I went in to when I left, or when I was leaving, was about 11 minutes total, so not very long for me. Now, of course, again, like I said, they were having issues there in Atlanta, but it is up to the precincts, it is up to the districts to handle that and make sure that it's there. I do very much advocate for the ability of everyone to be able to vote. I absolutely want everyone to be able to vote. Now, we are several months out from the actual election vote for president here in the United States. But nonetheless, it is nice that we can go early, and I hope that this was able to be resolved. Now, I know some of the officials that were running, and even Stacey Abrams have had to chime in about what was going on here, but I'm not really all that surprised that Stacey was chiming in because she's a potential vice president selection of Joe Biden. But nonetheless, guys, I want to show you, I actually have a mail-in ballot here. Now, I know you won't be able to see it in full detail, particularly when I go to open this up, because it does have my personal information on it, but that's kind of what the ballot looks like. I know I'm moving it and it's kind of annoying, but it's got my personal information on there, and I'd have to just kind of blur it all out and edit the video and everything to make sure that you guys can't see it. But it says, it's interesting because it says secure the vote, which is interesting because my little sticker they give us when we go and vote there, if you guys can see that, hopefully that's in focus. If not, it's not a big deal. But it says, I secured my vote, which is interesting. But nonetheless, yes, we were able to go vote on Tuesday. I was very happy about all that. If you want to see or get information about us voting here in Georgia, I will leave links below this video. But it was kind of nice to go ahead and secure that, get it knocked out. It's taken care of now. And hopefully, you see, we have several more months before the actual election takes place. So if you're a Georgia resident watching this particular presentation here for this Friday vlog, then I would encourage you guys to go to your polling stations when it is available and go ahead and vote. That way you got it taken care of. But it's interesting how quickly things are happening here in Georgia. We were the kind of the first state to kind of come out of the pandemic, and we're still going through that too, which was interesting. Some people at the polling stations were wearing masks and some weren't. Social distancing was being practiced, but there wasn't a lot of people there at the time that I had gone. But it is interesting to see how these are unfolding, but people do kind of have the time to be able to go and vote now, considering that we're still kind of partly under that lockdown or under that pandemic. So we don't have everything totally open here in Georgia, but of course people are returning to restaurants and doing some of their normal activities. We even see some of the kids practicing for football and even baseball. So it is kind of an interesting time here in Georgia, us being the first to kind of open up as well as go into voting. But nonetheless, guys, I will leave links to that information below this video. All right, guys, so that's going to wrap it up for this Friday vlog. I want to thank all you guys for your continued participation here on the channel. And of course, I appreciate those likes, those shares, and those comments as we are continuing on with the Friday vlogs, which has always been an interesting little project. But nonetheless, guys, of course, you see there on the screen, that would be the channel icon to subscribe if you haven't already, as well as notifications. That way you guys will always know when there's content here on the channel, as well as the Friday vlog. And I will see you guys right there behind the camera next week.